Mythology, one of the critical parts of human civilization. Since the dawn of time, humans have been creating stories to explain things that they couldn't understand. Whether it was an explanation of how weather works, how the earth was made, or even why humans act the way that they do, there is probably a myth that gives it reason. Yet, in our modern society, with the abilities that science gives us, myths don't play as big of a role. Or do they? Today, we are going to talk about how mythology influences human society and how mythology still holds a great amount of influence in our modern age. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to complete the following goals. You'll be able to explain the significance of mythology on human society throughout history. You'll be able to identify multiple mythological influences in human society. You'll also be able to compare how particular myths influence and vary in different societies, different time periods, and different regions. So, before we begin, we need to answer a very important question. What is mythology? And more importantly, what can be considered a myth? Well, according to dictionary.com, mythology is a set of stories, traditions, or beliefs associated with a particular group, or the history of an event arising naturally or deliberately fostered. Each mythology is comprised of hundreds of individual stories, called myths. These myths generally explain some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involve supernatural beings or events. This tells us a couple of things. The first thing is that all religions can be considered mythology, since a religion is based around a set of stories, traditions, and beliefs, and those stories, traditions, and beliefs are associated with that particular group. We also know that any stories based around a historical event can be considered part of mythology, whether the stories around the event were deliberately altered or the stories around the event were unintentionally altered, with each person forgetting parts of the story and sometimes adding parts to make it more interesting, like a long game of telephone taking place over thousands of years. So that leaves us with the question, why should we be studying these ancient stories? Believe it or not, these old stories are still around to this day, and influence us in ways we don't even realize. Don't believe me? Well, let's look at this list I've comprised of fields of study that have some amount of influence from Greco-Roman mythology, the myths believed by the ancient Greeks and Romans, and definitely the most well-known mythology. On this list we have the following: history, religion, fine arts, astrology, psychology, biology, architecture, drama, literature, anthropology, other mythologies, film, philosophy, poetry, music, dance, ethics, sculpting, symbolism, archaeology, cartography, sociology of culture, computer science, video game design, marketing, law, television, and radio, just to name a few. But instead of me just listing off these fields of study, let's actually look at one of them in more detail. Let's take a look at marketing. Dozens of modern-day products are named after a myth in Greco-Roman culture. There's Trident gum, which refers to the weapon of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. There's Trojan condoms, referring to the Trojans and their city of Troy, which was the center of Homer's Iliad. There's the Honda Odyssey, which refers to the journey of Odysseus going home from the Trojan War. There's Amazon.com, which refers to an ancient tribe of warrior women called the Amazonians. There's Pandora Radio, which refers to the first woman created by the Greek gods. There's Nike, named after the Greek goddess of victory. There's Venus Razors, named after the Roman goddess of beauty. There's the Tennessee Titans, which refers to the race of gods that came before the Olympian gods, led by Zeus. There's the Saturn Car Company, which was the Roman name for Kronos, the leader of the Titans and the father of the Greek Olympian gods. A group of maps are placed together in an atlas, which refers to the Titan who was forced to hold the world on his shoulders. There's the Midas Car Company and their slogan, "Trust the Midas Touch," which refers to the Greek king Midas, who had the power to turn everything he touched to gold. The band Styx is named after the river Styx in Greek mythology. There's Ajax, the household cleaner, which refers to the Greek warrior Ajax from the Trojan War. And these are just the ones I found on the first 5 results on Google when you type in mythological references in marketing. So, we've seen how much influence one group of mythology has on different fields of study. But what about our everyday life? Well, don't worry, I have an example for that too. My example is yawning. Yes, you heard me right, yawning. But not the act of yawning, but what most people do when they yawn. They cover their mouth with their hand. But do you know why? Well, back during the Middle Ages in Europe, people believed that the devil and his minions could take control of your body and use you for evil. One of the ways that people believed this could be done was an evil spirit going into your mouth when you yawned. So, what was the thing that you could do to stop this from happening? All you had to do was place your hand in front of your mouth when you yawned. That way, none of the evil spirits could enter your body. Even though most people don't believe in evil spirits taking over human host, the tradition of covering your mouth when you yawn still remains. So now we've talked about some of the influences of mythology on human society, but most myths change depending on the culture, the time, and even the region. For example, more common myths like vampires, witches, and werewolves change depending on the culture, most of the time in how the society views them. Let's look in more detail on how myths change in different cultures by looking at one of the most recognizable mythological creatures, the dragon. The characteristics of dragons are generally the same throughout all cultures. Giant reptilian creatures, 4 legs, giant claws, but the similarities end there, especially when it comes to the Western European dragon and the Eastern Chinese dragon. In Western culture, dragons are most of the time portrayed as evil creatures that need to be slayed by the hero. To match this evil origin, European dragons breathe fire, have spikes and leathery bat-like wings, and generally protect a cavern or castle where they hoard gold and treasure, and most of the time, they are associated with the great hero who tries to slay them. Eastern dragons, on the other hand, they're, well, more like Mushu from Disney's Mulan. Unlike Western culture, Eastern culture views dragons as symbols of power, strength, and good luck for people who are worthy of it. Even in Chinese language, excellent and outstanding people are compared to dragons. The Chinese view dragons as benevolent, wise, and just, and they help worthy warriors become brave and bring honor to their families. This is what Mushu does for the main heroine of the movie, who wants to be brave and bring honor to her family. He even goes on a rant about dishonor when he's disrespected.
All right, that's it. Dishonor. Dishonor on your whole family. Make a note of this. Dishonor on you. Dishonor on your cow.
While dragons are great examples on how myths vary in different cultures, they are not as great of an example of myths changing throughout time. But don't worry, I got an example that'll cover it. My example of a myth changing through time is the witch ball. The witch ball is a hollow sphere of colored glass that contains a few thin fibers strung inside. During the 17th and 18th centuries in England, these balls were hung in cottage windows to ward off evil spirits, witches, evil spells, ill fortune, and bad spirits. The witch ball is claimed to have led to, get this, the Christmas ornament. Those glass Christmas ornaments that we place on our Christmas trees were allegedly placed there to dispel a visitor's envy at the presents left beneath the tree, similar to how the witch ball dispels evil spirits. So we've talked about how mythology influences fields of study and human society, along with how those myths vary between societies and through time. But we still have one more topic to cover. Regional myths. Like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, these regional myths are related to a particular section of the world. Sometimes the myth can be located only in one country, like the myth of Akimanto or Aoimanto, a Japanese urban legend about a malicious spirit who haunts public and school bathrooms, who will ask you if you want red paper or blue paper. If you say red paper, you'll be decapitated until your clothes are stained red. If you say blue paper, you'll be strangled to death, making your face blue. Sometimes the myth can be located only in one state or territory, like the Jersey Devil, a kangaroo-like creature with the head of a goat, leathery bat-like wings, horns, small arms with clawed hands, cloven hooves, and a forked tail, who lives in the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. Sometimes the myth can be located only in one town, but instead of just naming an example, I decided to show you one instead. Hi guys, so to show you a local legend, I'm about 10 minutes away from my house here at the back of a Lowe's Theater on Route 1 in New Brunswick to show you this 7-foot tall grave behind me of Mary Ellis. Now, why am I showing you this? Well, according to local legend, the ghost of Mary Ellis comes out every night and looks out onto the Raritan River in search of her long-lost love, a sea captain who went out to sea but never returned. So we've talked about how significant mythology has been in human society throughout history. We've also talked about how mythology influences fields of study, and we've talked about several examples in the field of marketing. We've talked about how mythology still affects our everyday lives, and we've talked about a belief from the Middle Ages, causing us to forever place our hands in front of our mouths when we yawn. We then discussed how mythology varies in different societies and in different time periods. We then concluded with how myths sometimes affect only a small region, but it is still significant in the overall culture. So, to conclude this lesson, I have 2 assignments that I want you guys to complete. The first assignment is to write a response to this question. After watching this lesson, has your opinion on the significance of mythology changed? Why or why not? The response should be between 5 to 7 sentences. The second assignment is a little bit more in-depth. I want you guys to research 5 different examples of how mythology has influenced different parts of society. You should try and find one example in each of the following areas: influence in a field of study, influence on modern society, myths that are viewed differently by 2 different cultures, myths that are viewed differently in 2 different time periods, and myths from a particular region. Once you have your examples, prepare a video explaining the examples that you found. Remember guys, there are lots of other mythologies that I didn't talk about. I only spent time talking about Greek and Roman myths in a significant amount of detail. I didn't even cover Egyptian, Norse, Persian, African, Gallic, Gaelic, Britannic, Germanic, Spanish, Russian, Mongolian, Japanese, Chinese, Scottish, Icelandic, Australian, American, Native American, Mexican, Canadian, Incan, Aztec, Mayan, Indian, Arabic, Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, Islamic, Jewish, or Christian mythology, just to name a few. There are lots of myths and mythological influences still out there for you guys to discover. As always, if you have trouble with the assignments, feel free to contact me at my email address, and I'll help you out as best as I can. Have fun with your research, and I look forward to reading your responses and seeing your videos.